Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today on e-mobility in Africa. I am going to be joined by a brilliant panel of people today who I will introduce you to shortly. We'll just wait for people to come into the session and then we'll get started. So as the numbers tick up, I will just wait a minute for us to get going. And this will be available after the live session as well, so people will be able to view in their own time. So welcome, my name is Lisa Ashford. I'm MD of Energise Africa, which is a platform providing flexible and affordable finance to organisations that are developing in emerging economies. I'm going to be introducing our panel today. Bear with me, and I'll just give you the rundown of the format. So we have an hour for the session today. I just have to remind everyone that anything that we talk about today is not a financial promotion. We're not promoting any offers. We are just finding out information about the sector and spotlighting some of the activities of the companies who are participating today. You may submit questions via the chat function. We have a Q&A session at the end, and I will attempt to feed those questions into the right panelists. I will progress without further ado. So in this order, could we please have a very brief introduction from Jonathan, Shigun, Luke, Elissa. Thank you.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Jonathan Booth from the Carbon Trust. Many of you might be familiar from the Carbon Trust in the UK, but we also have an office in South Africa where I am based. Look forward to the session.
Hi everyone, I'm Shigun from Bisedge. I'm here in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm the CFO of the business and also representing for the business development side of it. And I'm looking forward to a very fruitful session with you all.
Hi, I'm Luke Burrows. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Mobile Power. We've been doing battery swap for households for a number of years and recently just launched a new product doing battery swap for e-mobility in several countries, which we'll get into later, I'm sure.
Sorry, Elissa from Zembo. I am head of sales team. We assemble and sell electric motorcycles in Kampala, Uganda, and looking forward to all of your questions during this webinar.
Great, thank you everyone. It is a pleasure to have you all on the panel today. So we just wanted to set the scene for you, for those who are listening, to talk a little bit about why e-mobility is an important part of the equation when we're talking about the transition to net zero for Africa. And Africa in its totality contributes 3.6% of global CO2 emissions. So in the bigger picture, it is a small part of the challenge of climate change. But with that comes certain issues, because of course, in Africa, climate change is often felt some of the hardest. And so building sustainable economies which have an opportunity for real growth and an opportunity to leapfrog in terms of technology, e-mobility is a fantastic opportunity to really build out strong businesses that have growing workforces within Africa. And we're going to discover and explore a little bit more about that today. And Jonathan, from your perspective, perhaps you can just tell us why, from your point of view, as part of PREO, is this transition to e-mobility so important, and why we should be getting behind it?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Perhaps I should have said in my introduction, I also have managed the PREO program for the last 2.5 years. I'm getting a message up, internet connection is unstable, so hopefully you can hear me okay. But we'll get onto the PREO program in a bit. But in terms of what you said there, Lisa, I think, I mean, just to reiterate, I think your point, Africa is in terms of sort of its global contribution to carbon emissions is really a small player, and is only responsible for, I think, about 2.8% of global GDP. But at the same time, it has sort of around 15% of the world's population, sort of north of 1.2 billion people. And there's a lot of very fast-growing economies in Africa. Ethiopia and Rwanda, for instance, grew sort of at over 7.5% for 20 odd years, which was unfortunately ended by COVID, but hopefully things get back on track soon. So I think, I mean, it becomes clear that the continent sort of is growing fast, sort of albeit from a low starting point, and without sort of green growth, sort of the relative contribution to carbon emissions will quickly start to increase. And I think that given the sort of less mature state of many African economies, there's sort of fantastic opportunity for growth to sort of be green from an early stage, to sort of leapfrog the pathway that many developed countries have taken. And mobility, I think, is a prime example of that. Mobility in many developed countries is responsible for a big chunk of national carbon emissions. And I think it's a great opportunity for African mobility to grow in a greener, more sustainable way.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. And when we're thinking about the impacts on local cities, etc., climate change is one aspect, but also air quality is also extremely important as well when we're thinking about what's the impact of the mobility industry generally. And there's this fact in our blog that we put together, which if you haven't looked at it, is quite interesting on the Energise Africa website. There's a statistic from the World Health Organization that was astounding to me, that more than 1 million people die in Africa every year from air pollution, making it more deadly than diarrhea, HIV, or malaria, which is an absolutely sort of astounding fact, which sort of further underpins why this is so important. What are the other environmental benefits, and what is the sector's role in improving the economy of African countries? Jonathan, perhaps if you could comment, and then I can ask Alyssa to give her thoughts as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think from an environmental perspective, we've spoken about climate change, but I think we sort of most active in the electric motorbike space, and your average electric motorbike sort of has 10 times less life cycle carbon emissions than an internal combustion engine motorbike. Which is significant, obviously. And I think, many of you are probably familiar with African cities, places like Lagos, Kampala, etc. Many areas are very highly populated, very densely populated, and motorbikes certainly would, especially sort of older internal combustion engine motorbikes that are less sort of efficient, do result in a lot of air pollution, a lot of particulates being emitted into the atmosphere, which certainly, I think, as you said, Lisa, has a major impact on health, I think. And then from an economic point of view, I think there's opportunity sort of across the value chain, and I think that's sort of important to understand the electric motorbike opportunity, or the electric sort of vehicle e-mobility opportunity in terms of the value chain. And there's batteries, which sort of at the moment are largely imported from China and sort of Southeast Asia. The motorbikes themselves in the motorbike space, but they sort of apply to many other sort of e-mobility sectors, which largely would also be imported. And then the recharging stations, whether that's sort of battery swap out recharging stations or just sort of park your vehicle and recharge your battery. And so I think, I mean, that sort of ecosystem, sort of at all points in that ecosystem, there's a fantastic sort of economic development opportunity for businesses. And then on the driver's side of things, sort of again, to come back to the e-motorbike opportunity, electric vehicles, whether they're e-motorbikes or any other electric vehicle, have much lower running costs and much lower operational and fuel costs. And sort of what we've seen in the e-motorbike space is that where motorbikes are used for commercial purposes, for instance, in East and West Africa, where they're used to transport passengers sort of as bodas, as they call them in East Africa, the drivers of those motorbikes can sort of double their profits on an e-motorbike as opposed to using an internal combustion engine motorbike. And so they're taking their sort of daily earnings from sort of $5 to $10 perhaps a day. And each of these people would be supporting many, many others in their communities. And so the sort of trickle down effect of that is significant. The ability of e-mobility to sort of improve livelihoods, I think, should certainly not be underestimated. And I think, I mean, yeah, I've touched on electric motorbikes, but e-mobility in the African context sort of is much more than that. I think we'll hear about electric forklifts as an example, but PREO has also funded electric boats sort of in the Great Lake regions. There's a lot of fishing, there's a big fishing industry. And then sort of light commercial, medium-sized commercial vehicles is also a fantastic opportunity there. So I think it's a big ecosystem with lots of sort of points at which sort of organizations could enter private sector businesses, which in turn is able to sort of result in very positive impacts for sort of drivers and other small businesses.
Right. So as we've got different panelists in different countries at the moment, maybe Alyssa, if I could come to you for a bit of a sort of viewpoint from you're sitting in Kampala today, to tell us a bit more about the ecosystem in your country, and then we can move to Segun, who's in Lagos in Nigeria. Just a second, thanks for everyone.
Definitely. So in Uganda only, there's 1 out of 5 deaths that are caused by air pollution, and Kampala air quality alone is 2 times higher than what WHO recommends. So of course, on the environmental point of view, there needs to be something that is done in terms of air pollution caused mostly by either malfunctioning 4-wheeler vehicles and the fuel bodas, because there are 2 million people who depend on the boda industry. In Kampala alone, there's an estimate of around 400,000 bodas going around, and that's why it's a big cause of pollution in Kampala. So just to introduce Zembo very quickly, we assemble and we sell electric motorcycles to low-income motorcycle taxi drivers that we call boda drivers in Uganda. These motorcycles are sold as a rent-to-own to allow these people, these low-income boda drivers to access e-mobility. A boda driver usually earns less than $10 a day, and they're very vulnerable to fuel price fluctuations, especially nowadays. So not only do we sell electric motorcycles, we also operate a network of swap stations in which the drivers can change their empty batteries or their empty battery against a full one. So
Alyssa, may I pause you for a second, not to steal your thunder, but if we could come back to you in a minute, and we'll get much more further into the detail of your organisation. So thank you for that just broad context of the situation in Uganda. And could I just go to you, Segun, to give the context for Nigeria?
Thanks, Lisa. In Nigeria, it's not so different from what you'll find in most African countries in terms of the impact of air pollution being caused by the various means of transportation. Lagos, for instance, which is about the most populous city in Nigeria, with about 15 million population, you can imagine the amount of carbon being generated from internal combustion engines that run on the roads of Lagos every day. And then you take this further to more of the interland and then the rural areas. So there's really no alternative for clean transport system here in Nigeria. And it's really a thing that should be looked at this particular point in time. And I think it's like a step in the right direction, having these discussions and seeing how the various players also contribute their little in their various business spaces to see how we can make like a more clean transport system and EV system in Nigeria.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So Jonathan, just tell us a little bit about how the PREO program is helping to support and develop these organizations, and then we'll dive into more detail with each in turn.
Yeah, sure. So PREO is a grant funding program. Essentially, we are funded by IKEA Foundation and the British government, UK aid, and we provide grant funding to small businesses across sub-Saharan Africa. And so our focus is the productive use of energy. We sort of sector agnostic, country agnostic. So we fund currently about 26 small businesses in probably 11 or 12 different countries, and e-mobility does feature sort of quite highly in terms of the number of companies that we've provided grant funding to. And our focus is very much sort of, we look at business models. So we're looking to provide early stage grant funding to business models to companies that are just sort of starting up in a sector and who wouldn't be sort of eligible to receive funding on more commercial terms. And the sort of key attribute that we look at is productive use of energy. So do these companies have a sort of business model which is going to use, I mean, we do have a criteria that grantees need to be using renewable energy for productive purposes. And so most of our businesses are starting up a new business in perhaps an established sector, but sort of they're taking a different angle to the traditional approach, and they are using renewable energy for productive purposes. And the ultimate aim is to sort of improve livelihoods, bring sort of local economic benefit into often fairly rural areas. So we funded on the call, we provided grant funding to Zembo and Empower. And I think I'd like to think our grant funding sort of helped many small businesses, including the ones on the call, to sort of get their business models going, sort of prove that their business models are viable and help them get to that next step, sort of where they can attract sort of equity or debt financing. And so we look to prove sectors, and e-mobility is sort of certainly one of those that we're looking to prove in the region.
Yeah, so let me just, I'm going to come to you, Luke, sorry, in a minute. You're going to go first on our deep dive. So just how does Energise Africa fit into this mix as well? Well, just to say as well that Energise Africa has been part of the Transforming Energy Access programme run by UK Aid, which is, would you say it's a sister to PREO, effectively?
Yeah, so PREO gets an element of its funding through the T program. So I think it's more big brother than a sister. I mean, T is a £300 million program. PREO is a £15 million program.
Which obviously we hope will expand in due course. But so UK Aid, recognised this opportunity to use innovative forms of finance, such as investment crowdfunding, to help scale some of these pay-as-you-go solar companies with distributed systems in rural areas of sub-Saharan Africa. And Energise Africa has been fueling that growth through providing working capital debt to organisations who are probably pre-break even, but with a strong growth trajectory. And now, as we look to expand beyond Africa and beyond solar, the obvious areas to sort of diversify into is productive use and within that sort of e-mobility. And so Bisedge is one of our first organisations within the e-mobility sector who are using our flexible, affordable working capital arrangements to expand the business. And this helps to build track record for the organisations as they develop, and also provides funding and debt funding where it may not otherwise be available from commercial banks at an affordable rate or at all, in fact. So it's sort of a follow-on from the great work that PREO does to try and bring the organisations through. Obviously, we are funding some larger organisations as well, which are using the debt as part of their overall funding package by having a sort of strong, diverse set of funding strands to create their overall funding needs as they grow. So let's start with Luke, who's going to tell us a little bit about the organisation, and then we'll move to Shagun and then Alyssa, and yeah, we can get to some questions afterwards.
Well, thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Jonathan, for great introduction, and also Lisa giving your context there and understanding Lagos. We are actually operating across several of those locations. So we've got quite a big team in Lagos at the moment. We've got partners in Uganda, although not in Kampala. Home for us was Sierra Leone. We started back there a number of years ago, and we're now operating in Liberia and the DRC as well. We started out as an energy access company. So we provide energy to households using battery rental. We do about 500,000 rentals every month. We've got about 50,000 active customers, and we're growing that platform very quickly at about 1,000 customers a week. So we had a very successful business in the continent doing energy access, which is scaling. But I'm sat here in the UK office in Sheffield, and about 3 years ago, we said, we've actually stumbled on something quite powerful with battery swap and getting that to be a profitable business. What other sectors could we apply that to? And so over the last 18 months, we have been running a pilot in Freetown, Sierra Leone, where we use our Mopo Max battery in various different vehicles. The most successful so far has been the Okada, which is the West African name for a boda, or an electric motorbike taxi. And we've been operating that very successfully. Great unit economics coming out of that. Alongside that, we use the same batteries in another application, which is generator replacement. And I'm sure Shagun and Temitope will be nodding along with descriptions of the Lagos power situation. Millions of people in Lagos operate their households from small generators, and we really see a powerful nexus between Okada riders and the ability to use the same battery to replace small generators, especially in the Nigerian market, but also in the DRC. So we really are very excited. I think our motto at the moment is we want to replace petrol with sunshine. The battery swap element of that is really important. And in a lot of cities, I'm not sure about Kampala, but in a lot of cities in sub-Saharan Africa, you have to do self-generation. And so our experience with our solar hubs, we operate hundreds of solar hubs already. We're really applying to the e-mobility market. And I suppose where we see ourselves fitting is we do operate this for ourselves, but we also want to partner in the future as the industry grows, perhaps with Zembo one day, but as the industry grows, to really make a vehicle agnostic rental platform, taking sunshine and putting it into e-mobility. We operate several bikes. We're kind of agnostic on a bike basis. We just really care about getting sunshine and really changing the way in which petrol is becoming an increasing driver of economies in sub-Saharan Africa. We see a massive opportunity across these whole societies. That's probably enough waffle about mobile power. Just to explain, we as a company are mobile power, but our customers see our service as MoPo. We have lots of customers for whom English is not their first language, and customers started calling us MoPo before we even did. So I hope that settles any confusion that people might have. Is that helpful, Lisa? Anything else you'd like me to add in there?
No, I think that's perfect. Jonathan, you know, do you in your experience so far with mobile power, do you have anything to add in terms of how the support has operated?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think what's been interesting in our relationship with mobile power and all the sort of other e-mobility companies that we funded is just sort of getting an understanding of the different business models. I don't think there is one sort of, when it comes to e-motorcycles, cars or boaters, there certainly isn't one business model that can be sort of deployed into the market. I mean, I think I mentioned multiple value chains, but sort of Rome, who's we funded in Kenya, sort of operate more a B2B type business model, and then B2C business models. Sort of there's direct sales, there's rent to own, straight rental models. Yeah, so I think, I mean, some of our learnings out of mobile power, yeah, I think it was really interesting to sort of understand the dynamics of that business model, and that it certainly is one that has a lot of potential and is very scalable into multiple markets. But yeah, it's one of sort of multiple options that are out there, and I think that's what makes the sort of industry exciting. It's new, it's growing, people are testing out different business models, and it's very unlikely that there will be sort of one winner that takes all, so to speak. I think there is space for many different approaches and many different sort of investment business opportunities in line with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, as Luke pointed out, hopefully quite a lot of collaboration as well between entities. You mentioned Rome, who will be listing on the platform in the very near future as well. So that's great to hear. So over to you, Shugun. Would you like to introduce us to the business?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, most certainly. So my business is Bisedge Limited. We are a green logistics business, ideally focused on the material handling space. What we do, basically, we are in partnership with Leader Material Handling, who are leading manufacturers of electric forklifts globally. We started this 2019, and we go providing full outsourcing, whereby we provide electric forklifts, ideally replacing diesel and other internal combustion type forklifts, LPGs and the rest, to multinational clients in Nigeria. Our first focus is on the manufacturing space, and we've had quite a huge success with the beverage industry, particularly Heineken and Coca-Cola. And we're doing this also providing with the forklifts, the operators, the maintenance, and a digital fleet management system as a combined service, providing this to the client on a long-term basis, like an off-take contract, where we get to then do like a monthly rental agreement. Now, with this business, it's quite interesting because there's so many sides to it beyond just providing forklifts and operators. It's the social side to the business as well. For every forklift that we deploy on site, we're able to generate 4 full-time employments. And also targeting female operators, which is like a first in the industry. Prior to now, this type of industry or this type of services are mostly popular for casual type of labor employment. So with Bisedge, what we do differently is full-time employment, socially secure jobs, or full-time employments per forklift deployed, and also focusing on females. We achieved our first success last year, partnering with UNIDO to set up like a training school for the female operators, and we had like a very, very interesting response and feedback from the clients. If you check on our social pages on LinkedIn, you'll see some of our operators really active there and very proud wearing the Bisedge badge and all that. So we do this, also trying to improve upon the technical capacity within the material handling space. So what we also have is a backup team of trained technicians, and we're also going into plan to set up a training school for technicians as well. So it's really changing the game in the material handling space. First focus, replacing diesel forklift. And this is interesting because for every diesel forklift we replace, we're saving something around 70 to 100 tons of CO2 emission on an annual basis. And we're doing this as well, focusing on improving the social impact of the people, providing full-time employment to the operators, doing this again with gender inclusivity and with female operators as well, which is a first, and then standardizing the technical knowledge of the industry. And so far, we're operating out of Lagos. By the end of the year, we get to 200 forklifts with 800 full-time employees. And next year, we're opening up as well to the East African community, focusing first on Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. So that's the Bisedge story so far.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting. And I know that sort of gender empowerment and female lens that you have there in terms of training and full-time jobs for operators is something that probably is also really important within the PREO program, I should imagine, Jonathan. It certainly is within the Transforming Energy Access program, where really trying to make sure that women are included as much as possible in the strategies of the scale-up programs of the businesses, and that obviously it's about training and developing talent on the ground as well, so that you've got a really skilled local workforce. Anything to add there, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, the companies that we've invested in have all sort of gone to great lengths to sort of incorporate or to try to create jobs for women, especially, and to provide training where necessary. I think the sort of electric motorbike market is very male orientated in Africa, so there's probably a lot of work to do to sort of get more females involved sort of as drivers, and I think many of the companies on this call are doing that. But then sort of in the other parts of the value chain, sort of electric motorbike manufacturing, maintenance, recharging stations, etc. I think there is a lot of opportunity for creating jobs for women, and that certainly is one of our sort of main objectives. One of the main KPIs that we report on to our donors is it's a number of jobs created for women. So, and that's not just for the sake of it. I mean, there's a lot of research out there to show that sort of the ultimate economic impact of giving women jobs in Africa is often sort of a lot bigger than sort of the more traditional male orientated approach.
I'd love to come in on that. We pushed really hard on female entrepreneurship and had amazing results. 37% of our agents out in the field there are female. If I look at a graph of the revenue generation and just randomly scatter it, you can tell which one's male and which one's female without labeling it. It's quite incredible, the difference in efficiency, which is something we were expecting, but we've seen it across the board. And so it's a model that we're really pushing hard on for all the right reasons, but also it just makes more business sense.
So can you expand on that a bit more, Luke?
Yeah, so I should say we have an existing large business with household energy where we run solar powered hubs in small communities, and agents distribute batteries from those hubs to paying customers. And it started out as a pilot program where we said, what would happen if we ran all female hubs? And honestly, we had a lot of trouble in the early days. We created a lot of issues for those women. Some of them were beaten up. There were some terrible situations. So we partnered with some charities and started doing whole community training around why this made sense and how communities could support these women. And we put in some gender empowerment officers. And what that means is people that can talk directly to these women and offer coaching and advice. And then over time, we started launching 50-50. So male agents working with female agents and bringing that kind of support together was really powerful. And we found that the female agents manage their time much more carefully. They're generally much more collaborative, and they're much more able to kind of hit the peak times with customers and generate a lot more revenue for the time that they're putting into the business than their male counterparts. I'm not exactly sure why, but the results are very stark. It's quite incredible, and we're hoping to do some more research on that. In the e-mobility sector, I think Jonathan is really right. A lot of Okada riders all of the Okada riders that we come across are male. I don't think we've ever come across any female Okada riders. But we have run a program with KKs, which is the tuk-tuk that you can see behind me. We've run a pilot, if you like, with female KK riders that's been very successful and seen similar trends. The safety elements of being a KK rider are different from being a Buddha or an Okada rider, but we're really excited about what that could mean for that kind of empowerment, but also the economics are very powerful and speak for themselves.
Great. Fascinating. Could talk about more about that all day, actually. Okay, so let's go to our other female on the panel. Alyssa, can you tell us a little bit about your company and what it's doing?
Thank you, Lisa. So Zembo is based in Kampala and sells electric motorcycles to low-income boda drivers, so motorcycle taxi drivers. Motorcycle taxi drivers usually earn less than $10 a day. So in order to make it accessible, we sell these bikes on a rent-to-own model, where the driver can pay over 2 years. And more than a rent-to-own model, it's a pay-go model. So if a driver is unable to pay, the only thing that's going to happen is that the motorcycle is stopped, and whenever this client is able to pay again, can use the motorcycle again. So we're not going to confiscate the bike at any point. We also operate a network of swap stations in Uganda, so from Kampala to Masaka. There are currently 27 stations at which our drivers are clients. We usually have a very bottom-up approach and work a lot with our drivers, which is why I say our drivers and not our clients, but essentially our clients. They can swap their battery within minutes. So Zembo was created in 2018 and now has more than 200 active drivers. The impact is triple-fold. So of course there's the environmental impact. We were mentioning the pollution numbers that are quite alarming in Uganda and in Africa in general. Since the beginning of its operations, Zembo has avoided up to 500 tons of CO2. We also have a battery recycling program. So we collect batteries that are malfunctioning and test the cells. So we're able to reassemble batteries from old ones. So we have a battery recycling workshop at the office, and we train youth interns to work there. The other impact we have is social. So the drivers are less vulnerable to fuel price changes. So they usually earn more than 60%. We're actually conducting a social impact analysis right now, because the 60% we had identified at the beginning of our operations in 2018 when fuel prices were lower than they are today. But we expect drivers to be saving more than 60% making more than 60% of what they would if they were on a fueled motorcycle. So we did create a lot of jobs in e-mobility by employing not only people in office, but also people on field. We have what we call swappers. I think the equivalent to agents for MoPo. We have people at each station, and we usually prioritize women also at the stations. For the same reasons as Luke has mentioned before. In terms of, and the third impact is industry recognition. So the boda sector, the motorcycle taxi sector is still a very informal sector. We help to formalize it, structure it, and have bodas recognized by the government by building regulations and increasing security. So we train our drivers in road safety, we provide them with helmets. We also train them in financial literacy. So all this helps in developing or structuring the sector. In terms of gender empowerment, we are also going to launch a pilot project with Women on Wheels to train the first batch of 15 female drivers to learn to drive a motorcycle and make a living out of it. So it's essentially training women to do deliveries, because it's less of a risk than carrying passengers, especially if the passengers are not female, etc. It can cause problems. You always have to think of unexpected consequences. And what PREO has supported Zembo with is a specific project. Zembo also has a 100% solar and off-grid corridor of 4 different stations, sorry, leading to the next big city. So from Kampala to Masaka, there's 120 kilometers that are covered by four completely solar stations, because our other stations are usually hybrids. They're a mix of grid and solar. I think that the grid in Uganda the energy mix in Uganda is green. It's 98% hydro. So it's not really a problem in terms of environmental impact to power our stations with the grid. But in terms of the grid reliability, it's always better to have solar, especially if you're going to go in rural areas. So PREO really helped us with this project, especially, and it served as a proof of concept. And now we hope to extend to other peri-urban or rural areas with 100% solar stations. Right now, there's a big focus in Uganda on transitioning towards e-mobility, and the president has set a national goal to transition fully to electric by 2040, and Zembo is actively participating to this transition.
That's great. Thank you, Alyssa. And, you know, that statistic about, 60% more income, is that right? From the model, from using traditional fossil fuels. I mean, that's a just incredible number, isn't it? And what a driver. And what I love about the organizations we're talking to today is that all of these the sort of built-in social positive impacts that they're having as well are just so strong. If you compare it to standard commercial organization operating in the UK, I just don't think that you would have such a focus on some of these additional sort of social benefits, in my view. So I think that's really amazing. Shigun, coming to you, you had some slides to share. Now, we didn't share those, but is that okay? Did you want to share those?
Yes, it's okay. I kind of spoke through them. I can put them just to see what the Bisedge impact is. Okay,
well, why don't we save those then for sending out to the for sending out afterwards, if that's okay. And then we've got a little time for some questions. So certainly one of the points that was mentioned earlier was around the battery recycling. And, I think that is often a question that comes up. It hasn't come up so far in the chat, but it might well do. So I wonder if, Jonathan, perhaps I could come to you first to just think about how do we deal with that if we're promoting the such rapid development of this sector. How do we cope with the recycling element of the batteries, etc.? And perhaps then each of the organizations could just, if you haven't already, touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not a sort of expert in this field, but I think that, on the face of it, when it comes to motorbikes, the battery swap out model sort of is sort of conducive to maximizing the life of a battery and then recycling batteries, because I think it's much easier to do that when the battery is easily taken out of a motorbike, as opposed to sort of having to take a motorbike or whatever else it is apart to sort of extract and then recycle that battery. But yeah, I think there's a big sort of market for second life batteries in Africa. So it's not just sort of recycling it down to its parts, it's sort of revamping it. And I think a lot of those second life batteries do come from Africa itself, but it's probably an opportunity to sort of bring in second life batteries from abroad and repurpose them for e-mobility in Africa. But I think in addition to that, the sort of another big question is, as sort of internal combustion motorbikes and other vehicles are replaced by electric, there's potential to create a huge amount of waste. And I think some companies are looking at, rather than building electric motorbikes sort of from the bottom up, taking existing sort of motorbike frames and adapting those to become electric vehicles. And I think that also has a fantastic opportunity to sort of reduce the life cycle carbon footprint of the entire sector. But I think there's probably still quite a lot of work to do in the space to sort of and to maximize the sort of local economic opportunities rather than just being reliant on imported products. I'm not sure if any of I see Luke nodding his head there, might have something to contribute.
I'll always talk, Jonathan, as my wife would say. I think the opportunities in e-mobility globally are significant in terms of recycling. And I think depending on the chemistry of the batteries that you're using depends on how that recycling works. We've been operating for a while, as I said, with NMC battery technology. Is the same kind of thing you get in your laptop or your smartphone, and that's the chemistry we've chosen to work with in our e-mobility market. One of the reasons for that is that we use our batteries first life, if you like, in the e-mobility application. You've got very high power draw, you've got quite a lot of demands, if you like, on batteries, and they get a pretty hard life in that setting. We have a lot of battery diagnostics. You can see all the geeks sat behind me who just spend their time thinking about batteries and software and algorithms. And we do a lot of work with the universities on accelerated cycle life testing. And what we found is the second life for batteries for us is in generator replacement. So you're talking about much less power dense applications, much more leveled out. And so we have a first life in e-mobility, second life in generator replacement. And then the third life for those batteries is in the storage at our hubs. So if you think about a solar powered hub, in the rainy season, you might have several days where you get very little sunshine, and certainly at night, there is no sunshine. So we put our batteries into that third application, and you can really eke out a lot of life from a battery in that third application. So thinking about this whole ecosystem as a stack is really important. Then recycling as a whole is not been very developed yet so far. And I think there's a fantastic opportunity on the continent. We're working with some of our recycling partners to look at importing capital equipment to do things like shredding on the continent and begin to build up recycling. But globally, this is going to be a really hot topic. And I think as minerals like cobalt become increasingly sought after globally, this is going to be a really interesting opportunity for some sub-Saharan African manufacturing organizations to step into.
And for Bisedge as well, regarding recycling, which is a very interesting topic for us, because when we set out with Bisedge, the main goal for us was to cut out carbon emissions in internal combustion engines. We also didn't want to create a problem with batteries by pushing out electric forklifts. Our forklifts are typically powered by lead-acid batteries, and they have like a lifespan of 5 years due to the intense usage that these batteries go through during their useful life. The major components, the metal casing, the electrolytes, and the plastic. And all three components are fully recyclable. So usually when the batteries get spent at the end of 5 years, the metal casings can totally be recycled with the metal recyclers. In any case that the batteries are still okay, we can always top up the electrolytes, which is a fairly easy process. And in any case that the electrolytes do not need to be topped up, the plastic containers can get washed, dried out, and also given out to plastic recyclers. And more importantly, there's also another angle around repurposing the lead in the batteries, which is like a bigger topic we have with like recyclers, and also in close partnership with the equipment manufacturer Linde to see that there are ways that the lead acid can be repurposed. But it's really interesting that for every single component that makes up the batteries that power our forklift, there's a 100% opportunity to recycle them.
Great, that's really interesting that everyone's obviously got a really robust answer to that, and is obviously working really hard. I wanted to ask a little bit about so two things: the financing challenges that you may have had in starting to scale your businesses, and perhaps just more generally, what have been the main challenges for the organisation so far? So if I go, I'll go Alyssa, Luke, and then Shugun.
In terms of financing challenges, there's a lack of local funding that is available for e-mobility. So it's all about sourcing external grants, debt, and equity. In terms of R&D, it's especially painful to not be able to have upfront grants, because what's important is to test different, in our case, different batteries on field, and many grants or funds are usually result-based financing. So the funds will arrive after testing. So that's one pain point for financing in the e-mobility sector. And then in general, another big challenge is logistics, lead times, because sadly there are no cells that are being produced in the region, or I'm not sure on the continent. There are batteries that are being assembled, but battery cells are usually produced in China or in India. And logistics lead times are a big pain point. Importing everything into the country is a challenge.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. I think generally, I don't know what you found, Lisa, but we've had to vertically integrate nearly everything. I think one of the problems a lot that you'll experience in poorer countries in sub-Saharan Africa is there is very little around you as a support network. So you end up needing to develop your own everything, fintech platform, all the way up to transport and all the way through. So I think that's really interesting in terms of protective moats. As a private company with investors, I think we've got a very strong protective moat. From our first products, we have a very integrated supply chain, all the way from design and engineering in the UK through manufacturing and supply chain in China, where we have our own companies, and then through into logistics and getting this operating on the ground in sub-Saharan Africa. But that's a problem if you're talking about developing a whole industry. And I think collaborating, I really want to see some strong collaborations between operators like Zembo and technology providers like Mobile Power as we begin to build up this market. We are entering our Series B funding at the moment, and I think the opportunity is colossal. If we took 5% of the potential markets in the few countries that we're in, you're talking about $1 billion company by itself. So really, to reach right across this market, there's lots of space for lots of companies. And I think we need to see that kind of horizontal integration happen, so we can really go after this. We found a lot of strength in funding with partnerships. So finding the right partners who are looking to invest in assets, especially revenue generating assets on the ground. Once you can get that proof point organized through grant or equity, you're able then to leverage that. And I think that's been a particular strength of Mobile Power coming into the e-mobility sector with an established business model with those partners has allowed us to move more quickly. But I think Elisa's right. There's a complete lack of local financing. The way the world is going at the moment is not helping those local economies to stand on their own 2 feet in terms of lending rates, and that's only going to increase as the world changes increasingly.
For us, I think our greatest financing challenge is like finding the right partner, because as a business, we're focused on so many things. We want to build a sustainable business that answers all the questions around sustainable returns, social returns, and financial returns. And sometimes it's a bit difficult getting someone who really keys into your dream and desires and goals and beyond just the financial aspect. And that's why with Energise Africa, it's like a great platform for us, and it's perfect for us because we consider them as partners. You really understand this. You really want to see us how we want to achieve every single goal that we want to achieve beyond just the financial returns. And you also make it quite easy for us. So that's like major financial challenge for us. Then apart from that, of course, is always the funding needs and the timing, also coupled with the disruption in the global supply chain lately. And that has also given us like some advantages and disadvantages. But in general, I would summarize our financing challenges as the speed of funding and finding the right partner, really.
Yeah, thanks for that, and great to hear some endorsement there for what we're doing. Always like that. And I think a couple of you have mentioned sort of collaboration and partnerships, and just maybe point to a interesting World Resource Institute report that just came out, which Energise Africa was sort of featured in, because it's talking about collaborative partnerships for meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. And actually, UK Aid and P4G and those that have backed Energise Africa took that very sort of forward-thinking approach to helping to fund the platform, and clearly that is needed in a partnership form to accelerate these business models as much as possible. So to the extent that funders can be flexible and really create sort of trusting long-term partnerships, that's obviously something that's really going to benefit the whole sector. So Jonathan, just coming to you to sort of round up a bit, from everything you've heard today, what would you say, putting you on the spot a little bit here, you know, the key opportunities that you see across the types of organisations that we're talking to, and where do you think the sort of next steps are?
Yeah, well, I think, as Luke said, the opportunity is massive. And when you're sort of looking at a business model that makes more financial sense for the sort of end user, like coming back to the motorbike example again, for the driver, then it's just a matter of getting this sort of infrastructure in place, and there's probably also an element of sort of behavioral change which needs to take place as well. But probably as soon as you sort of start to reach a critical mass of electric motorbikes in the market, the uptake of them will just sort of increasingly accelerate. So I think sort of yeah, the market is poised for very rapid growth, but needs to deal with sort of some of the fundamental issues, which I think we've sort of heard about to an extent now as well. Batteries, I mean, other things we've seen in e-mobility generally sort of relate to motorbike durability. Sort of getting the charging, the recharging model right might sort of take a bit more effort. Yeah, so and then I think the other thing is sort of the opportunity for localization. I think if Africa is going to sort of realize the full value of the opportunity, we need to localize it as much as possible, and that would sort of also help overcome some of the sort of supply chain examples, for instance, that we see. I think many African organizations are always going to be quite small players in comparison to sort of global operators in the space. So it's always going to be difficult to compete with a big American company, for instance, for high quality batteries from China. And I think, yeah, but I mean, manufacturing in China is always going to be cheaper unless governments sort of come to the party with incentives and policies and support, start becoming more supportive of the sector. So it's poised for growth, but I think there's sort of policy related challenges and sort of technical business model related challenges that still need to be overcome. And hopefully sort of people can come together sort of in the ecosystem over the next couple of years and realize this opportunity.
Great. Well, I think that's an excellent way to to finish, to really think about the scale of the opportunity, but you know, the call to action in terms of what needs to be done to help accelerate the sector. So thanks very much to all the panelists today. I wish we had double the time so we could really talk even more, because that was super interesting. So thanks very much for taking part. Really appreciate your time today, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks
Bye.
to the audience for listening. Right, bye.